Parshas Bereishis, Tov Shin Pei Daled. I know everybody probably expects me to give a big introduction about the Eis Tzara that Klal Yisrael is going through right now, but I figured the best thing we could do and the best thing we could say is to go straight to learning. And ultimately that's going to be what saves Klal Yisrael. A little bit more learning, a little bit more davening, a little more chesed, a little less lashon hara. Everybody doing just a little bit of what they can do, and that's really what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to see from all of us. So we're going to go straight into the learning. The Torah begins, Bereishis bara Elokim eis hashamayim v'eis haaretz. With that, the beginning of the Torah, we begin our year 15, Baruch Hashem, of our Shiurim, Nesivos Shalom, Thursday night. And it's the first pasuk of the Torah. And of course, we have on that pasuk the famous Rashi. Everybody knows this Rashi. Rashi asks that the Torah should really have begun with the first mitzvah of the Torah. Why are we starting by telling the history of the world, how the world was created, when the world was created, what was created? The Torah is here to teach us about Torah mitzvahs. So the Torah should really begin with HaChodesh Hazeh Lochem, which we know is pretty far off into Parshas Boy. Why does the Torah begin with Bereishis, telling us about the creation of the world? So we bring, to answer this question, Rashi says, we bring the pasuk in Tehillim of Koyach Masav Higid Li'amoy Loseis Lahem Nachlas Goyim. And what do we learn from this pasuk? That the nations of the world, HaKadosh Baruch Hu started Torah with Bereishis because the nations of the world throughout history, they may come one day, and we know now that we're 5,784 years later, we know not that they may just come one day, but there is hardly a day that the Goyim, the nations of the world, don't say that Eretz Yisrael belongs to us. Eretz Yisrael, you stole it from us. You stole Eretz Yisrael from the Goyim. So the Torah, the answer to that is, the Torah begins with Bereishis. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying, Bereishis bara Elokim, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the one who created the entire universe. And because HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the entire universe, it is only He, only Hashem, Kaviyachal, it is only He who can decide what land belongs to whom. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu desired to give Eretz Yisrael to us. So nobody will ever be able to have a taina. They could have all the tainas you want. And we see throughout history, right? It goes from this nation to that nation. Everyone's claiming Eretz Yisrael, but ultimately it belongs to Klal Yisrael. That's our place. So of course, that's a very, very beautiful answer to why we begin the Torah with Bereishis. But there's a beautiful kasha, and Nesivos Shalom asks over here. Now we understand. We start Bereishis, so we'll have an answer to the time of the Goyim when they say Eretz Yisrael belongs to us. No, Hashem who created the world, He decided that Eretz Yisrael belongs to Klal Yisrael. The question asked in Nesivos Shalom is, what about all the other Parshias? From Bereishis until Parshas Boy. Very good, I understand. The first Perek up until Vayichulu Hashemayim, maybe tell me about the first 7 days of creation. But what's going on? What about Noach, Avraham Avinu, Yitzchak Avinu, Yaakov Avinu, the Shvatim, the Golos Mitzrayim, Yetzias Mitzrayim? So it's a nice answer, but what about everything else? It's going to be a couple of months now until we read Parshas Boy and we read HaChodesh Hazeh Lochem. Why are all of those things written in the Torah before we were commanded to do the first mitzvah? So Nesivos Shalom explains this very, very important question with an extremely vital lesson for us, something that really every one of us has to learn and every one of us has to know. And it brings down Reb Chaim Vital, Zatzal. Reb Chaim Vital, in his Sefer, Sharei Kedusha, he brings down and he explains to us why we do not find, we all know, everybody always says how important it is for a person to have good midos, be a Baal midos. You ever wonder why in the Torah there's no pasuk by Daber Hashem al Moshe Lemar, you should have good midos? You never see it. You don't see that in the Torah. It doesn't say anywhere in the Torah that a person is obligated to have good midos, whatever the midah you want to choose, whatever is important to you, whatever you think midos means. But it doesn't say anywhere in the Torah explicitly that midos are part of the Taryag mitzvahs. They are not. So Reb Chaim Vital tells us this very famous yisoid that midos cannot be part of the Taryag mitzvahs. And he says, you know why midos can't be part of the Taryag mitzvahs? Because without having midos, the Taryag mitzvahs don't begin. They don't begin. It can't be one of the Taryag mitzvahs. In order for a person to be mekayim, to be able to keep the Torah does not stick to a person. The Torah can't be part of a person. Taryag mitzvahs can't be part of a person if you don't have good midos, if you don't work on your midos. Midos they're not one of the Taryag mitzvahs. It's the preparation for doing any and all of the mitzvahs. Reb Chaim Vital, and he continues, and he says something very powerful. He says that, he says bad midos are worse than averos. Person does an avera, he's over on something, one thing in the Torah. We know that's not good. But if a person has bad midos, he can't begin to keep the Torah. And you need to be more careful with your midos than about doing mitzvahs. The Torah cannot and will not become part of a person who is lacking in the midos department. So the Torah is only given to someone who is a Baal Midas Tovos. That's who the Torah belongs to. So Nesivos Shalom says that although we have now explained why the Torah does not explicitly command us to keep mitzvahs, because to keep midos, because we explained that midos are the basis for the whole Torah, and the Torah doesn't begin without midos. But how does that answer our question that we asked before at the beginning of this year? Why do we wait until Parshas Boy? Why do we have all these things between the Nesivos Bereishis and everything until Parshas Boy? What are all those things doing there? From the beginning of the Torah until the mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh in Parshas Boy, Dr. Nesivos Shalom. You know what's going on over here? The Torah is describing to us, says the Nesivos Shalom, Torah is describing to us by talking about Avraham Avinu, by talking about Yitzchak, by talking about Yaakov, by talking about Moshe Rabbeinu, by talking about the Shvatim. It's not just stories. We say so many times in our shir on Thursday night here that the Torah is not a storybook. You know what the Torah is doing by telling us about the Avos, the Imois, the Shvatim? The Torah is describing to us what Midos Tovos are meant to look like. Because otherwise every person can just go ahead, and we know that this happens all the time. People have their own barometers, their own gauges, and everybody decides what's good and what's bad, and this person is good and this person is bad, right? Who's deciding how we measure these things? The Torah goes ahead and talks about all these things from Parshas Bereishis all the way until Parshas Boy. It's not just telling us stories. It's telling us what Midos Tovos are. What we learned from Moshe Rabbeinu. What we learned from the Shvatim. How do we understand what it means to have good Midos? Because how else would we know? You really cannot decide these things on your own. And not only that, the Torah tells us, and it's something we have to know, the Torah tells us about an Esav. The Torah tells us about Lavan. Torah has to also tell us what not to be like too. what not to do, how not to act. Chazal tell us that the Sefer Bereishis is called Sefer HaYoshar. Why? Because it's about the Avos mostly, who are called Yesharim. The Avos are called Yesharim. However you want to translate Yesharim, whether they were straight, whether they always did the right thing. Zok the Nesivos Shalom, Sefer Yesharim should be taich the way that a person should act, the way we should form our midos, the way we should emulate the Avos and the people in the Chumash, the people that we're going to read about every week in the Parshas, to mold ourselves after their good midos. The Pasuk tells us, as we know, V'asisa hayashar v'hatoiv be'enei Hashem, that the obligation and the goal of every person is to do hayashar v'hatoiv. Hayashar, like we're saying, to have good midos, to be straight, to be honest, to be the right way you're supposed to be with your chaverim, with your family, with the people around you, with those who are existing in the same world as you at the same time. And even though it's not commanded in the Torah, as we said, it's not commanded, it's not one of the Taryag mitzvahs, we have to know V'asisa Hayashar is telling us that the midas are the basis for the whole Torah. And before you learn Torah, and before you want the Torah to become part of you, you have to know what is going to make the Torah part of you. What makes the Torah part of you is the midos. Is the midos that we inculcate into ourselves, that we work on ourselves with. And therefore, the Torah has a lengthy time from Bereishis, where we learn the lesson that Eretz Yisrael belongs to us, and no one can take that away from us, and no one can be fatainet to us about that we stole Eretz Yisrael, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who created the world, decided that it belongs to us. But we also have to know that there's a long distance between that and Parshas Boy, and we take a few months now to work on our midos, to understand that midos tovos are, like Reb Chaim Vital Zatzal says, it's the wagon that the Torah rides on. The Torah cannot go along with somebody who doesn't have good midos. And it's a perfect time. Now you're going to start having the Friday nights also, going to start getting longer in a couple of weeks. We're going to change the clock here. You have time. I always say, like, it's so difficult to really, really get a picture and to appreciate just in doing Shnai Mikra V'Chatargum. Of course, that goes without saying that everybody should try to do that, to read the Parsha. But just to take a little bit more time, to pick a sefer, to learn, either a little medrash, to learn something. I happen to enjoy, they have beautiful svarim now they just put out for Reb Chaim Kanievsky Zatzal, different things for Reb Nosson Tzvi Finkel, different things that talk to people from today, where you're able to learn and expound upon, to broaden a little bit, to understand that it's not just the words that are written. It's a lot of times a lot deeper. We can learn a lot more from the Parshiyos. And it begins this week. It begins Parshas Bereishis. There's nothing like starting from the beginning. Telling yourself every Friday night, whatever it is, 15 minutes, I'm going to read, try to learn a lesson from the Parsha. The lesson going forward, the lesson we could learn this week is the lesson we talked about tonight, to understand how important it is to have good midos. How important it is, bein adam lachaveroi, to treat your friends, to understand that the Torah is not a storybook. The Torah is telling us how to lead our lives and how to go about every single day of our lives.